Are we in? Yeah. Okay. Hey, everybody. Let's figure this stuff out. This is a live Q&A session on all things related to Swedenborg kind of stuff. Let's see what we can figure out. Thanks for coming. Just write your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best. The first one is from Barbara, who says, did Swedenborg see and talk about seeing spirits at his death? Oh, I bet he did. He was seeing spirits during his life. Like this was not a noteworthy day to him to see spirits. That was like they're all around us all the time. The physical world and spiritual world are intimately linked. The only reason we don't all see them is we've got our spiritual eyes closed, which is probably fine. It'd probably be, could be a little confusing to go about your day with seeing input from both of the worlds. They can be a little jumbled and stuff at times. But his actual death itself, there was nobody in the room with him. So we don't know if he talked about any kind of particular visions at his death. The closest encounter or closest experience anyone had with him before his death was the person that I believe at the end of his life, he was renting a room from somebody, and they said that on the day of his death, which he had given indication to a number of people that he knew he was going to die that day, that he asked someone, what time is it? And they told him the time, and he said, well, that's good. And then maybe died right then or shortly after. He didn't mention any particular encounters with spirits and things then. Although I know that people who are in hospitals getting near death, if you talk to anyone who works with them, or a lot of people who work with them, it's very common for people to talk about seeing people or getting ready to go on a journey. It seems like there's a ton of experience of that coming through. Okay, thanks. Next one. That's all I have time for today. Aaron O says, I finally made it. What's up, Aaron? Thank you for coming. Regarding hell, let's talk about hell. How does the spirit reconcile those born into abusive and painful situations with a toxicity later becomes their norm? Will they heal on the other side? Yeah, because that wouldn't be fair. First of all, the idea of heaven and hell, as people think of heaven and hell, immediately it's like a panicky kind of idea. Wait a second. There's this giant fork in the road, and you might miss out on happiness and go to this like perpetual unhappiness. So then you start to feel like, wait, what if somebody falls through the cracks of that system? Nobody's going to fall through the cracks because heaven and hell are based on what you love and what becomes a part of your spirit. And the only thing that becomes a part of the spirit is stuff that you choose in rationality and freedom. Heaven and hell are merely opposite parts of a spectrum in which everybody's allowed to pursue what they love. So yeah, people who have both who are surrounded by a lot of stuff that is, what do you want to call it? Evil. People hurting each other, people doing terrible things to each other, where that's the norm for somebody. Aren't they going to be more predisposed to do that stuff? So actions are only meaningful for their spiritual content, which is another way to say spiritual content is the intent. So what's somebody intending when they do stuff? And what do they intend based on their own sense of what rightness and wrong are? So somebody who has a distorted sense of what right and wrong are, and they do something that's wrong, but because everyone else was doing it around them, they think it's right. I would imagine that's what matters is the intent. They think they're doing what's right. I know that people will have not just varying external circumstances, but a varying heredity. So the internal circumstances, that some people, you can have two people born in the same house, in the same family, but that's not a very good example because heredity gets passed down from parents. So you have two people who are born in the same neighborhood, but one of them has this fascination with evil, a certain kind of evil that the other one doesn't. It's because we all are born with spiritual heredity, which is tendencies to enjoy particular kinds of evil or good. So some people can start life with a much more loaded negative heredity, that there's all kinds of appeal to them to do evil things that for other people, they're not into it anyway, so it's not as hard for them to resist it. all that matters. It's not, God's not sitting there with a checklist and saying, well, based on externals, the external rules where you can't do this and you can't do this, I'm going to credit you or blame you for that. The only stuff that stays with us is what's done in freedom from rationality according to our conscience or our sense of right and wrong. And God works to try to give everyone a more and more good, true sense of right and wrong. But if you do something bad from a good motive, it's not counted against you. That's all. It's a great question and a very complex topic, and we could talk about it for a long time. I did fine. I didn't do great on it there, but that's about, I think, that's a start. Juan says, here's my question. Yay, let the questions begin. Here's mine. Any mention of the apocryphal gospels in Swedenborg's writings? What are your personal opinions on apocryphal texts? Would you say they have truth in them? I saw this question came in before we started, and I had to look up what does apocryphal mean. And from what the computer told me, there are apocryphal gospels which are not the ones you'd usually find in the Bible, but there's other ones. Is that what we're talking about? If so, let me say, I know next to nothing about those, which is true for a lot of things. But Swedenborg asserts that a lot of the religious makeup of humankind stems from things that are true. So, and I believe he's more ecumenical than certainly than probably a lot of his peers were at the time. But even now, I think you'll have a lot of mainstream religions that say our history, the history of this religion is the history of truth. But Swedenborg says that even things like, let's say, Egyptian hieroglyphics were based on a knowledge of correspondences, and that the proliferation of world religions, there are threads of a central truth in all of them. Or I don't know if he says all of them, but I would think all of them. I wouldn't think something would really persist and hook people if it didn't have that in there. So if there are these texts hanging out, it could well be that even if they're not part of what Swedenborg would call the Word, which is a particular revelation that consists of having a continuous internal sense that has 3 layers to it, that is based on these correspondences, it could be that would you say they have truth in them? I'd have to see what they say, but a lot of things have truth in them. Truth is everywhere. That's part of divine providence, is to get truth all over the place. So probably so. Hey everybody, welcome. Violet says, did Swedenborg believe in reincarnation? Also, can you expand on what he believed the book of Genesis was in relation to life on earth? Yes. Yes, I can expand. No, about reincarnation. So, we did a show called Do We Reincarnate? And while Swedenborg does describe a lot of the things that are now, that I hear discussed when people are talking about reincarnation, he discusses those, he talks about those happening, but in the spiritual world, the kind of cycling through and maybe having periods where you don't remember who you are, that sort of thing can happen there. Karma and actions carrying with them their own consequences, that happens in the spiritual world, but he does not give any indication that you come to re-inhabit a physical body in the physical world. He does say that learning and growth continue forever, but they continue forever in the spiritual world, that this was an essential part of our early formation, being on this world, but we don't need to continue to come here to learn. What was the other one? Oh, can you expand on what he believed the book of Genesis was in relation to life on earth? The book of Genesis is part of the Word, like I was just describing, and the Word deals with 2 things, the Lord and the church. And the church is the state of receptivity in each one of us. So it's made up of ideas and facts and religious or spiritual truths. Those are the framework into which God can reach us and bring us to life. So everything in the Bible treats of those things simultaneously, both the nature of God or divine love and then the nature of the state we can get into in order to connect with that divine love. So the story of creation in Genesis is a story of our creation into being spiritual people, where you start out when it says, I'll give you a quick primer on it since I just did a talk about this a few days ago. You start out, it says, the earth was without form and void. That is the stage when we are not yet spiritually awake. We are not yet awake. We are just egocentric, and where self-centeredness and materialism is what runs us. The let there be light is when we first start to have a distinction in our minds between what's ours or out of our negative egocentric self, and then what's the Lord's, or the idea that good and truth are something transcendent. In the division of the waters on day 2, that is dividing the different concepts in our mind. And then when the earth appears and plants start to grow, that is when we've gone through distress in day 2, and we begin to then repent and start to do things that are spiritually good. But those things are done under sort of compulsion and fear because we're going through a hard time in our life, so they're just like little plants. Then the sun and the moon appear, which the sun is love and the moon is the faith that comes from love, like I was just saying the whole text is about. So that's when you start to be motivated by, I want to do this spiritual stuff. I really believe these spiritual things, and that's what motivates you, and that allows new actions to pop up, which are symbolized by days 5 and 6, which are speaking with conviction is like the living birds and fish, because those have to do with intellectual things on day 5, and then acting with conviction is the animals and the humans, which have to do with affections on day 6. Day 7, the day of rest, is when we become heavenly people, which are overtly aware of God's influence, and that's a state when God can rest. So that's the creation story, and everything else isn't dealing with those same kind of topics. The flood was not a literal flood. It's a description of the flood of falsity and evil that wiped out the early trajectory of the human race's spiritual development and led to the kind of world we're in now. Garden of Eden, all those stories packed with meaning. To actually go through Genesis would take many, many volumes, which is what he did in his set Secrets of Heaven. So if you want to know in depth, you can download those for free on Swedenborg.com. He goes through verse by verse talking about what it all means. We did a number of shows. We did a show called The Meaning of Adam and Eve. We did The Meaning of Noah's Flood. Look up those things up. Check them out. Crash Organism says, before Wednesday goes crazy, just want to say thank you for opening my eyes. Thank you, Crash. And yes, I'm glad things are going good for you, and Wednesday gets crazy. That's for sure. Okay. Diana Graham, what proof do we have about the afterlife? What about for reincarnation? How can I reincarnate with my husband if he's already dead? Will he wait for me so we can come back together? Yeah, proof for the afterlife. I guess the strongest proof I feel like I've encountered for the afterlife is the ubiquity of spiritual experiences, and particularly near-death experiences. Obviously, Swedenborg is a really meaningful account to me, and I feel like it makes the most rational sense and feels the most tied in with how I experience life. But if nobody else was reporting any kind of experience of the afterlife, I would, what's he talking about? Is that really something that happens? But there are just so many people all the time that experience this as a reality and come back absolutely convinced. Reincarnation, as I was just saying, Swedenborg doesn't say that we do reincarnate, that your husband is not going to go, you are you, he is him. You can't go and be another person. So he's going to wait for you because the two of you are going to continue to grow together in the afterlife. And you can grow closer and closer forever in that spiritual form. William Boyd, did Swedenborg talk about famous people in heaven? Will we still be able to watch concerts from famous past entertainers like Elvis? I would think so. I mean, people continue to live lives based on the lives they lived here. People do things like listen to concerts. We have a show called What Happens to Celebrities in the Afterlife. Because Swedenborg met a few. He doesn't talk about Elvis, because that was a little before his time, but he talks about Newton, Aristotle, one more, a theologian, I think. I can't remember. But yes, everybody goes to the afterlife, famous people and non-famous people. Some people who had been religious figures, who had been saints or some kind of important religious figure, people will go to them and then learn slowly that, oh, no person is any more sacred than any other, and actually we need to follow God. But people are allowed to go and find that out. Okay. Matthew Bush. Hi, Curtis. Question. How important is it to know how much love a stranger has for the Lord before we help him as a neighbor? Sorry to sip in between, i.e. giving money to the homeless, especially if they are drinking. The study of charity, the study of how to know how to best exercise love toward people is a really complicated, sophisticated thing. We tend to try to reduce it down to just do the loving thing. Just be nice to people. But I think even the point you bring up right there, if I want to give this person money because I know that money is helpful, but what if they're gonna, and I know that in the short term they want, and you know, I don't know, I haven't had a lot of experience dealing with alcoholism, so I don't feel like an expert in knowing how to do that. So I can imagine you in that position, like, okay, is it, but you know, this person is going to need this in the so what do you do? That's a really significant question. How do you best express love to people? How important is it to know how much love a stranger has for the Lord before we help them as a neighbor? I would say I don't think that matters in the same way, because okay, so God is, no matter what, is trying to, well, maybe it's not as simple as I just tried to make it. So God does say that you can't give too much to people who are intent on harm, because they will use what resources you give them or help you give them or whatever to go and do harm. But it sounds like the person you're talking about there isn't, oh, you know, you mean are they intent on harming themselves? Yeah. So I don't think in that case it's about how much love do they have for the Lord. It's like that's a case in which somebody needs, like, it's triage. It's like when they need help in this moment. So I would think it's more about how do you help get them to some kind of place of stability. I think it's probably like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you're in a state where you're struggling with a number of major things, you just need, it's I don't know if it matters where you are on your religious path, because there needs to be a certain level of safety and stuff created. Not to say I know what to do in that situation, but great question. Tamara says, did he talk about orbs? He does describe one group of spirits that wanted to be seen as a sphere rather than as a person. I don't know how common that is. Also, he talks about auras a lot, which he says are like sphere, invisible, actually in the spiritual world, visible, but emanations of what's in your heart and mind. So what's in your life that like go out from you. But no, I don't think orbs in the way that, well, people now, when you say orbs, I think of people saying, orbs, like someone took a picture and there's like an orb in it. There weren't pictures back then, so I don't know about that. Where did we go? I lost my little place. Paul says, hey Curtis, please, did Swedenborg say anything about Isaiah 53? Whoa, man. Chapter and verse. Man, let's see. Well, I mean, I knew Genesis 1, but that's a little bit easier to remember what Genesis 1 is. So, let's see. What's Isaiah? Let me type some things. What's Isaiah 53? What even is it? What are we even talking about with Isaiah 53? Oh, man. Isaiah H53. Let's go, Isaiah. What do you got here? Oh, this is talking about... Okay, I know where I'm going to point you. There is a thing called Spirit and Life Bible Study. And this is something that is run, it's past tense. Dr. Jonathan Rose, series editor of the New Century Edition translation of Swedenborg's works, did this for a couple years where he had this Bible study where he would go into the text of that book and look at it through a Swedenborgian lens, just like I was doing a second ago with the creation story. And he had this whole talk on Isaiah 53. Come on now. I'm trying to find it through, like I can get the Spirit and Life Bible Study, but maybe I can search all of his. Go to spiritandlifebiblestudy.com and see if you can find there Isaiah 53. Because I'm going to try to put that together in real time. That's outside my area of expertise. Come on now. Well, or if you can't find it in there, leave a comment here and we'll try to get it to you. Okay. So, in conclusion, I don't know. John Keeve says, hello. Can a God of love... Wait, let me get my little meter thing going on here. Hello. Can a God of pure love even comprehend evil? Could God's love of us be blind and therefore didn't foresee that free will could lead to evil? Could God have been blindsided by evil? I don't know. Swedenborg talks about the divine design, which everything good is in the divine design, and everything that's not good is God's trying to get that back into the divine design. And he says that he's able to know, because he is in the divine design and knows it so completely, from that he's able to know everything that's outside the divine design as well. So in that is an intimate knowledge of everything that is evil without being in that evil. But I think God did know. God did know, because everything evil has been foreseen. That's the way Swedenborg describes God's dealing with it. That everything bad that happens in our lives, God has foreseen and provided for it. So I would imagine that foresight extended to be for the whole thing. So somehow there must have been this divine calculus that in the end it's all going to be worth it. Wherever this is all heading, I'm talking about the whole human race, in the end, this is worth doing. Yeah, man, let's get there. It's gonna have a happy ending. Or else I'm sure he would have said, no, we can't do this. We can't do this. Gaston says, in the Golden Age, we received God's will directly. Now we are influenced by various spirit communities. Is there an after? Is an end to this world in Swedenborg's view? Great question. So do we get back to the point where you don't need to have this connection in your will and understanding to spirits in heaven and hell to create that equilibrium? I hope so. I think that, what were the conditions in the earliest era of humanity that led to us not needing spirits? It had to do with perception, that you were able to, there was an inflow from God that allowed you to know instinctively what was good and what was true. We also had our mind and heart weren't separate like they are now. That was a defensive mechanism, that God made it so that you can feel one way but kind of think or act another way, or you can look in at your own behavior and critique it, because your mind can kind of detach from your desires for things and say, nah, I shouldn't really be doing that. That was not always how human beings were. We used to be more like the state of when you see a little kid who just says what's on their mind and acts on their impulses, because we had this link to God. So I would imagine if we can restore that stuff, like the innocence and perception, maybe we don't need the whole spirit influence thing anymore. Yeah, probably trying to get back to that. Violet Sky says, may I ask, please? Sorry if it's been asked before, but in which book does he talk about Jesus, please? It's a good question. I think it's been asked before. One thing you should know, Violet Sky, is that Swedenborg calls Jesus the Lord. Usually. Sometimes he'll be talking about Jesus, but in the beginning of this book, which is the first Secrets of Heaven, this is the first one that he published in his theological phase, he says early on, from here on out, I'm going to refer to the Lord Jesus Christ as the Lord. And that's where you'll find, so in every book he's talking about the Lord, and that's what he's talking about. There is a book called The Lord, which you can download on Swedenborg.com, which is exclusively about the Lord, Jesus. But that book, it's really technical, and it's a ton of just Bible verses. It's my feeling of it when I think about it, my impression of it is that it was it was directed at members of the clergy to try to show them that what he was describing was in line with the biblical narrative. He says that the entirety, as I was just saying, that the entirety of the whole Bible, Genesis on out, is talking on one level about Jesus. He talks in the book Heaven and Hell. He says that the first thing you got to know is that the God of heaven is Jesus. And when he's saying it's Jesus, he's talking about as opposed to, there was a prevailing doctrine in his day, which is still out there quite a lot, that there's the Father, and then there's Jesus, and then there's the Holy Spirit, and they're kind of the same but kind of separate. And he was adamant that there's one God, and Jesus is that God. And the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are like the soul, body, and actions of one God. So Jesus is all that. He and the Father are one. But as we've mentioned in quite a few videos, people who have never heard the name Jesus Christ still can know Jesus. That if you're anyone who's picturing God as a person is thinking about what Swedenborg would call Jesus, because that's Jesus is God of everyone. And also anyone who lives by the principles that Jesus commanded, regardless of whether they heard them from the written accounts of Jesus or not, is following that path that is Jesus. So it's both like really particular, the importance of Jesus, but also really broad and ecumenical, which I think would have to be if we're going to say that God is not going to let anyone slip through the cracks of not doing the right spiritual path in life, like we were in the beginning. Okay. Amber asks, hi Curtis, does Swedenborg talk about why some of us thirst for God and others may not? It doesn't seem to be a choice, which isn't fair to those who do not. Yeah, I think if you were here a little bit earlier in the show when I was describing the inner meaning of the book of Genesis, that talks about our spiritual reformation process. And that, I think that's a process that kicks off at different times in people's lives. So, could be that somebody just hasn't quite started that yet. But when you're saying, is it fair to those who do not? Everybody, God is leading everybody toward the place that they can be the happiest. And he talks about there's 3 levels to heaven, which has to do with the level to which your mind is open to the influence of God. And he describes the first level of heaven as people who are, it's kind of like you're saying, people who will live a good life and acknowledge the principles of the truth, but aren't interested a ton in going deeper or learning more. And they are there as happy as they can imagine being. He talks about it sort of like different size cups. Even if you have more depth to understand and experience God, when you're at your brim, if your cup is smaller, it's still full. and that people, if you get led into more of a knowledge of God than you're ready for, it's actually painful and unpleasant. I would imagine that people continue to grow closer to God forever. Angels are continually perfected in love and wisdom. So it might just be pace too. I would imagine that God is interested in people coming into a more and more overt and open relationship with him, because that is how he's able to confer more and more happiness to people. So I would think it's God's ideal intent that everybody be very thirsty to make that connection. But probably there's just this wisdom of, who's ready right now and who's going to be ready later. Foresight, that kind of thing. Great question. Okay. Oh yeah, Sean Smith said to Violet, true Christianity is a good one about Jesus. And Violet, I would say, don't hesitate to watch some of our videos. We have a whole playlist if you go to our homepage about Jesus, and there's plenty of us taking you through the basics of what Swedenborg says about it. Okay. Aaron O says, I would be so nervous to do anything live. You are brave. I think you explained that really well. Keep forgetting about the intent part. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't used to be. Well, you should go back and watch the very first videos on the Off the Left Eye channel. I was very awkward at doing stuff on, let alone live, but even just talking to a camera, which now I'm so used to. It was very awkward and weird. So it's just, anything gets easier the more often you do it. And honestly, all of you are so great. All of you are so great that it makes this really easy. When I think about doing this Wednesday, I just think this is going to be great, because everybody's like, you are all very nice and you're asking great questions and you're very kind about saying, oh yeah, you're doing a good job. So one of the reasons why this has gotten easy for me is that every one of you is awesome. So yeah. Hi, Lupe. Okay, so let's see what we're talking about. Brian says, what was Swedenborg's opinion on charged places in nature? Do some places have stronger correspondences, come closer to the spiritual world? Man, are we talking about like vortexes or something? Let's see. So okay, so a couple things that come to mind first about that. Oh, my like tea thing fell in the water. Okay. Listen, you don't want to hear about my problems. The couple things that come to mind there. Ancient people, religious traditions that were aware of correspondences would go to particular places to have their worship. Like I said, the ecumenical, the all acknowledging nature of what Swedenborg says is God's outreach to the human race. People knew that mountains corresponded to love, and so they would go up onto them to have their religious ceremonies. They knew that a grove of trees corresponded to intelligence and wisdom, so they would go into groves for parts of their worship. I bet, it seems like whenever I watch any kind of show where it tells you about a particular area and people's historic religious connection to it, they say, well, these people that have been living here for a long time believe that this mountain is sacred and it's where the gods or God did something. I bet that there's a general correspondence, like the mountain is generally loved, but maybe that particular mountain corresponds to something. Swedenborg says that there are particular parts of the world that correspond to things. He says the reason why the Bible was written about this one little section of the planet was that all those places in there at that time had a correspondence. So the land of Canaan, wherever that was that the Israelites went into, that Canaan had a correspondence with heaven. Swedenborg said that in his day, because Europe was where the Christian church was centered at that time, there were countries that had correspondences there as well. He didn't say what they were. I would be very, and that was a couple hundred years ago. So what corresponds to what now? I don't know. All that together says places can have connections with the spiritual world. Probably if people are feeling something, it's because there's some kind of connection. Wireless Karma says, are you talking only about the Abrahamic God? I don't think so. It's yes and no. So the Abrahamic God, the God described in the Bible, the Torah, and then the New Testament, that line of churches, like obviously the Christian church encompasses within what the Christian central religious document encompasses the central document or text of Judaism. So those two have kind of a sequence to them. He says that is the line of the particular group that does a particular function for God's connection to the world. So because of the revelation that those churches possessed, they were forming a particular correspondential function of keeping heaven and earth connected through the things that we read about in the Bible. That doesn't mean that the people that were in the Christian and Jewish tradition, and the two churches, Swedenborg talks about two churches that preceded those, which he just calls the ancient and most ancient churches, which were actually groupings of multiple religions that all had a similar character to them. Those were in the line as well, but we don't know exactly where you'd find that historically. All those, that doesn't mean that people in that particular section of the world God cares about them more, or is those people even that they go to heaven more. In Swedenborg's day, he said actually that it was generally more difficult for people in the Christian world to go to heaven than people outside the Christian world, because there were so many fallacies and so much love of self and love of the world, love of dominion in Christianity that it was actually tough for people to get in from there. So I would know, not just the Abrahamic God, even though I'm talking about one God, but Swedenborg says that this is the God that everyone who's connecting with God connects to. So people in their other religions that have nothing to do with that religious line that I was just talking about, when they're people that are experiencing God through those, are experiencing the same God. And when just a spiritual experience anecdote, I was recently reading how Swedenborg was saying that every community in heaven, God can appear in communities in heaven. Or I think he says the Lord. So I think that would mean Jesus Christ, according to what we were just saying a minute ago. But every community in heaven, Jesus can appear in those. So meaning God in human form can appear in those communities. But in every community, the Lord looks different. And the way they see the Lord is based not on how the Lord is, but on how they are. So their own kind of love and their own kind of wisdom makes it so they see the Lord in a particular way. And it's not like theater or patronizing. This is just your ability to see. You can't just see everything about God. You can only see from your own vantage point. So I think it's I think that the Abrahamic God, like the descriptions of God in that tradition, are one very important place in which that God is described. But I guess I'd wonder what else do you mean besides that? Like, I think that all the gods are the same one. How's that? DNA. Hi, Curtis. Huge question. Since I've been going through my rapid awakening, I've been seeing faces, spirits attached or in corners of the room. Some recognize, some not. Can you explain some, please? Well, it sounds like you're going through something. I hope that it's something fun and not feeling scary. Swedenborg would say when you can see non-physical things, that you'd be seeing that through your spiritual eyes, so your spiritual senses would be opening. Oh, so like some recognize, some not, meaning you recognize some of the spirits, like that some of them were people you used to know, and other ones were not. Well, we have, we have people that we know. Thought brings presence, so that can bring spirits together. But also, we are surrounded by a community of spirits that are the people who used to live in this world, who have died, who have similar love and wisdom to what we have. So you may be seeing them. I would say DNA. You should see if you can read Swedenborg's Dream Diary. It's I think it's called Dream Diary. Look for Swedenborg or Journal of Dreams. It's sometimes translated as. That was during his rapid awakening. He gives sort of a day-to-day description of what he was going through. That would probably be interesting to you right now. Lisa Fern says, I'm brand new to Swedenborg. What would you recommend my first reading of his works be? Hey, Lisa. Just out of the blue, I would say Heaven and Hell. I guess I'd love to know a little more about what you're interested in. We did it. There's a video. If you just search on YouTube, who was Swedenborg? What should I read? There's a video with Dr. Jonathan Rose where he talks about there's sort of Swedenborg's most popular books and what he describes in each one. But Heaven and Hell is his most popular book, and it's a pretty good starting place. It's pretty interesting, pretty tangible, and I mean, it's if you're going to get in there, watch our videos along with it, because there's a learning curve. It may seem like he's saying one thing, but if you know the way he uses terms, what they all mean, he's actually saying something different. I'm so glad you're going to embark on that. Do it and come and ask us questions, watch videos, and you should be in for a treat. I definitely continually find really useful stuff in there. Kodiak says, so are the four spirits who are always with us assigned to us? Do they know us? I don't understand how they're assigned to us, but don't know they're with us. Thanks. Yeah, I think the angels know that they're with you, but the evil spirits don't. Because evil spirits, if they knew they were around you, they would attack you. I know this sounds very weird. One way that it's a little less weird is if you just are looking at your own mind and just noticing how your own negative stuff, just how it behaves. That it's like, I don't want to be thinking about this thing right now, or I know that that's a terrible thought to have, or like, why would I want to go do that? That stuff just kind of bubbles up. And according to Swedenborg, the evil spirits who are with us, the reason that they're there is through them, the evil things in us are stirred up, and we, by our connection with the angels, can then look at those evil things and say, I don't want to do that. Even though maybe I used to be into this, I don't want to do that anymore. And the way that spirits can be with the evil spirits are not assigned to us, and that nobody sat down with them and said, this is what you're going to do. Our own, the negative stuff in us attracts them like gravity. The angels, I don't know how that works. They may well be assigned to you. So the evil spirits, the way that they don't know they're with you. I know if someone's just tuning in, they're like, what did I stumble into? The evil spirits that are with you come into possession of your, like they come to sort of have the same access to your memories and who you are, and they think they're you. In their world, they think that that your stuff is their stuff. That's why they don't try to destroy you. But in them living out their negative version of the stuff that's in you, that stirs it up and allows you to see it and separate from it. It also, we actually, because when we only enjoy negative and evil things, we need that connection with hell, because that's where we get our joy from. When we're just totally egocentric, and we can't just jump off that stuff immediately. It's like if you tried to drastically alter your, or like just if you were a severe alcoholic and you just tried to quit alcohol right away, just cold turkey. We can't just quit our negativity cold turkey. Okay. Oh man, it's 3:00. Well, who cares? Let's keep going. I'll give you a couple other things, see if I can. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to the end of the questions, but I never do. Who cares? Let's see. Let me go back to where I was and see if I can get one or two more of these things. Come on now. Brand new to Swedenborg, Four Spirits. Mermy says, hey, I had a question about the community we belong to on the other side. Is it possible to spiritually connect with them for help or advice or support? I'm not talking about seance style, just generally. The community of spirits that you are connected with, the good community, like the angelic community, should be showing up in your thoughts and in your intentions all the time. So I would think yes, like not seance style, but I would, you go ahead and say like, hey, can you please help me? They would, all the spirits in that community, all the people in that community would say, oh, well, we can't help you at all. God helps you, but he can help through us. He can reach you through us. So I would just do that and then look for inspiration, like stuff that happens within the regular scope of your mind, like the thoughts that seem good and true. That's how they communicate with you. As far as like advice, I don't know how distinct it would be, but try it out. See what it does. Okay. What is Swedenborg's thoughts on being afraid to do good things because of the reward aspect? Like if there's a reward for good, then doesn't that detract from the good? I think go ahead and do good things. It's impossible for us to know, and Swedenborg even asserts this, that you can't know for sure if you're doing good things because you want to look good or because you really care about what's good. But go do them, because good things will get done anyway. The way that we really make our distinction is through not doing bad things. That it's not really about you've got to try to do a bunch of good things and then you'll be a good person. It's that you've got to resist the bad things that you are inclined to do. That's how he even says at one point, that's how you know the good deeds you're doing are not just for credit, because you are at the same time not doing harmful things. And we all know this. If somebody ran some big charity and helped all these people, but turns out that they were abusive or something in their personal life, nobody says, wow, that person's so great. Or so clean up that stuff, and then the good stuff will take care of itself. Okay. All right. I'm going to do a few more here. Okay. Hemel said, your video about negative evil spirits really hits home to me. I'm starting to realize how evil spirits affect me. What's your thoughts on evil spirits using people or family members to trigger me? Family members, yeah. Man, you know what? I don't know. I hate to say it, but he doesn't talk. I don't think Swedenborg gives any examples of spirits affecting other people to try to mess with you. I like definitely spirits affecting other spirits, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I just don't know anything about it. But that's a great question. Linda says, my first grandson was killed in an accident. I'm 74. Will I see him again? Absolutely. There's the love that you have and the thinking you're doing about him will absolutely magnetize your spirits together. People have the most joyful reunions in the afterlife. This is something every near-death experience teaches, and Swedenborg teaches it as well. You're going to see him, and I can't wait. It's going to be like amazing. So let's see. Oh, Cyberview says, I read Swedenborg mentions God is human in Divine Love and Wisdom. Can you explain what that means? Oh man, I shouldn't have stuck around. This is too complicated. It's gonna take too long. Okay, let's see if we can do the elevator pitch. God is human. Ancient people used to say, everything I'm gonna say is according to Swedenborg. How would I know this kind of stuff by myself? Ancient people used to say that God was the only human. None of us were human, only God was human. God's essence is everything that humanity is copied out of. This is evident in the way we use the term now. We say, it was just a really human moment. Or if we do something that is bad, we say, come on, that was inhuman. Or if we say we're trying to talk about someone's inherent value, we say, they're a human being. What's truly human is love and wisdom together. God is love and God is wisdom. And so God's form is the human form. All of us are like patterned after that. Your body right now is a little map of heaven. If you look at the way that all of your cells work together selflessly for the whole and receive everything they need for the whole, and that everyone's working towards the same goal together, that is heaven. And heaven is patterned after God. So God is human. Everything else, and even plants, animals, minerals, even, Swedenborg says, have aspects of this human form in them. Swedenborg talks about people from other planets. He calls them human as well. Human is God, and that radiates out, and all of us are a different reflection of that core humanity. That's a start. We've done, you could do many shows about that. One last one, Rainbow Dragons 1, 2, 3. Does God love people who don't love him? Yes. God can't, in True Christianity 56, God cannot look at anybody with a frown. There's nothing you could do, nothing, the most horrific things people could possibly do, let alone whether you love God and think about God or not. God's love for everyone is infinite, and it doesn't diminish or increase based on what you do. I think that there's anguish that we cause God. I think God like I was just saying, God's human. So everything we feel, like we think about the anguish we have when like our kids reject us, or someone we care about doesn't care about us. I think, or somebody that we love is suffering or having things turning out poorly for them or making poor life choices or any of the above. Think about the feelings we have for that are a reflection of the ultimate feelings that God that God is feeling for us. And so feels anguish when people are suffering or leading themselves into lives that are causing harm to other people that God loves, or into themselves, or stifling their potential or whatever. But there's absolutely no, God's not offended. Like, you don't love me. I'm God. I'm the coolest. I'm God, and you don't love me. There's none of that. And there's no, hey, you broke my rules, so now I hate you. God isn't like that. God is absolute love. God can grieve, but God can't hate, and God can't stop loving, because I say God can't stop loving, but more accurate way to say love can't stop loving. God is love and wisdom, and God can't stop God selfing everybody. That's a good note to end on. If I didn't get to you, please leave a comment below, and our team of excellent expert moderators will get back to you. And thank you so much. I got to say something before we go. Wait a second. Don't go. Actually, never mind. I got something to say. This is the most important thing in the world. Check it out. Go to offtheLefteye.com. Let me type it in right now. And right at the top there, it says register for the Off the Left Eye experience. This is something that we are going to do a whole, June 24th to 26th, a whole in-depth weekend that you can attend from the comfort of your own computer, just like we are now. But think about Wednesday. Think about it not ending now. Think if I was like, all right, take a 5-minute break and we're going to be back for our next session. We are going to hang out and really get into this idea of the spiritual world around us. Go there and sign up. We would love to see you there. OffTheLeftEye.com. There's a banner right there. Join us for the Off the Left Eye experience. Okay? Cool. See you then. Thanks for hanging out on Wednesday. Let's end the stream here. See ya.